Wake up, everyone. It's time to talk about Link's Awakening, one of the most legendary Legend of Zelda titles. It's a classic, it's quirky, it's fun, and there are many ways to play it. Today, I'll be going over ways to play Link's Awakening as seen on the Game Boy, Super Game Boy, Game Boy Pocket, Game Boy Light, Game Boy Color, and Nintendo Switch. Do let me know which is your preferred way to play, as well as one that you'd be interested to try going forward. I'm Captain Keaton, and it's time to wake up. To link in your inbox, subscribe. Alrighty, the first version we'll be going over today is Link's Awakening as played on the green, non-backlit screen of the Game Boy. That's right, we're going back to 1993. Actually, earlier for the Game Boy itself, which was released in 1989, but you wouldn't have been able to play Link's Awakening until 93. Although this is the most antiquated way to play, there is something endearing about it. We frequently associate the color green with the Legend of Zelda series simply for Link being a boy from the forest. And I happen to really like how this looks on the Game Boy, how everything feels so green and lush. There's something sort of retro and vector-based about it, and it does bring out some of the foggy, dreamlike qualities that are present in the game. Now, is this my preferred way to play? Not necessarily, but it is a way to play that puts you back in time to what it was like. And I have to mention that of the Game Boy games, Link's Awakening is number 9 as one of the best-selling. So we may be complaining about it today, but back in the day, this was not an issue. Chronologically, the next way to play released as a peripheral for the Super Nintendo. It's called the Super Game Boy. If you ever wanted to play Game Boy games on your TV, well, this is one of the best ways to do so. Releasing in 1994, merely 1 year after Link's Awakening release, you could play it on your TV with expanded color palettes, a backlit TV, and a higher aspect ratio. Although the Super Game Boy does allow you to customize up to 32 color palettes for the game, the color palette that is most frequently associated with the unit is more of this coralline yellow, which actually happens to suit the island vibe of the game rather well. I haven't played through the whole game this way, but I do think that the contrast is nice. The yellow is more easy on the eyes than the green, in my opinion, while still bringing out some of the characteristic qualities of the game. I don't own a Super Game Boy, but if I did, you can be sure that I would be playing Link's Awakening on it. The next way to play Link's Awakening was in 1996 on a handheld called the Game Boy Pocket. The Game Boy Pocket was a smaller Game Boy that took less batteries and outputted Game Boy games in black and white. So I think we're a bit spoiled nowadays with the addition of color. I mean, even back in the days, the next handheld that would come out in the North American region would allow us to experience that. However, there is something to be said about black and white as a output for this game. Link's Awakening from a dream, and the fact that the game plays in black and white almost enhances the dreamlike state that Link is in, supposedly. Every time I see Mario characters in Link's Awakening, I'm reminded of just kind of how bizarre the game is. So from a narrative sense, I think it works. And I would be interested to play the whole game through this way. And the next way to play is weird. It's the Game Boy Light, a handheld that never saw light of day outside of Japan. It released in April of 1998, and just a few shy months later, the Color would come out and add color to the game. But before then, this was a way to play the game, especially with a backlit screen. While on the surface, the Game Boy Light appears to produce Game Boy Pocket-like visuals, this version of Link's Awakening looks more black and blue, kind of like my eyes when I try looking at it. I think this is my least favorite way to play the game as far as I've seen. It almost looks foggy. Now, I don't own the Game Boy Light, so I can't attest to that, but this is not one of my preferred methods. However, from a historical standpoint, it is interesting to see what the game may have looked like back in the day. It's time to finally add what was long missed from this game, color. That's right, Keatons, it's the Game Boy Color, and it's Link's Awakening. What were you thinking I was going to throw the DX version in? Not quite yet. That's because back in the day, if you owned a Game Boy Color and you played regular Game Boy games on it, the unit would already add some extra element of color. Now, it's not that much. It's really mostly green and red and white, but it is more vibrant than the other versions that came before it. This is actually the first way that I played, and I never batted an eye at some of the absences of color. I think the juxtaposition between the characters and the environments is what makes it stand out. And the fact that it's not fully colorized continues to add to some of the lucid dreaming sentiments that I really appreciate from this game, as well as Game Boy games in general. It's unfortunate that we don't get the original Game Boy game ported very often, because this is maybe one of my favorite ways to play it. Almost for nostalgic reasons, but also because it does lend the game a very nice visual style. But of course, many gamers probably want a bit more, and that's why in 1998, Nintendo R&D, the research and development team, did what was much needed, and they added a wider color palette in Link's Awakening DX, aka Deluxe. That's right, when I went to the ice cream shop as a young little Keaton, I said, "Can I get the Link's Awakening Deluxe?" And they said, "We don't have that flavor." But when I went to Toys R Us, they sure did. I played this back in the day as well, but I also downloaded it for the 3DS. This is no slouch. This came out just a few months after the Game Boy Color did, and it is number 9 in terms of the best-selling Game Boy Color games. It doesn't add much besides the color and an extra dungeon and a song to go with it, but that's not really needed, because the additions of color bring so much more to life in this game. It's really impressive and almost striking how colorful everything is. Trees that were simply green before now have different hues and shades of green. The water really stands out as it's blue. Nothing exemplifies this more than the color dungeon that is the added feature in the game. I also happen to really like the equipment that comes with it. When you're in the start menu, you can see some of the instruments are really shining with a rainbow hue. And the best scene in the game happens at the end. I won't spoil it, but the credit sequence played with full color is beautiful. It's now time to talk about the way that most people have probably played this game, recently anyway, and that is with Nintendo's 2019 Nintendo Switch Remake. Full disclosure, I have not played it this way, but I'll talk about why not and what some of the public sentiment is. For starters, this fully animated intro scene is incredible. I'm really proud of Nintendo for doing something like that. It almost reminds me of the Monster Boy remakes that have come out lately. The game also remakes Link's Awakening in a very faithful way, similar to how Link's Awakening DX did. The game is essentially the same, except that it plays with more of a toy aesthetic. There's also a fully remastered soundtrack that is really enjoyable on the ears, and the sound effects are also very pleasing. Now, I don't really have the disposable income to buy this right now, but it is something that is on my radar and I would like to get eventually. Originally, I was against this game for not really doing anything that was extraordinary and because the originals were good enough. But I can kind of understand that it doesn't really need to do anything differently. I don't necessarily need this game remixed. I mean, DX was just as well received back in the day, and I don't complain about that one. So, I mean, it would be hypocritical to maintain that position. So, over time, I've learned to be a little bit more forgiving of the game. Now, as far as the visual style goes, I think it's beautiful. I would love to play this someday, so I hope to. In any case, these are some of the many ways to play Link's Awakening today. Thanks everybody for watching. Do let me know which one you'd like to try, and if there's one you'd like to see me try. Take care, and see you with more Legend of Zelda.